is a different angle of the play.
Caitlin.
Watch this. Look at that. Look at her put her fist and her forearm into Caitlin Clark's neck on this play right there, and then uses her fist to get up.
Welcome back to WNBA Updates, the channel where we break down everything happening in women's basketball, the good, the bad, and the downright controversial. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most talked about situations of the season, the Alyssa Thomas and Caitlin Clark controversy that has taken the sports world by storm. From a brutal on-court incident to a post-game interview that set the internet on fire, this story has layers, and we're going to unpack all of them. So sit tight, because this one is a lot. To truly understand
we all know what this really is. It's an attack on Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's the
magnitude of what happened, we need to go back to the play that ignited everything. During a high-stakes game, Alyssa Thomas set what can only be described as an extraordinarily aggressive screen on Caitlin Clark. And we're not talking about a standard physical...
It was our defense in the third quarter. We knew we needed to come out with a good energy. We knew that they probably weren't happy with their first half, and they threw the first punch, where versus the first half we threw the first punch. So
nothing. It was as if a switch had been flipped when a reporter finally dared to discuss her performance. Instead of addressing the obvious, her complete absence during the playoffs, she launched
injury, a broken ankle, a torn ligament, something catastrophic. Clark hit the ground hard, completely blindsided by the force of the contact. The referees did step in and called Thomas for an aggressive foul.
Alyssa Thomas jumping on Caitlin Clark. What the fuck?
But that was essentially where the officiating response ended. No review, no escalated.
Instagram and Twitter, these are choices we make. There's an easy way. The league doesn't have to get involved. The Indiana Fever don't have to do something to get you away from social media. Put your phone down. Don't download the apps. Don't engage.
Infraction, no further consequences in the moment. For a play that violent, one that had fans and analysts genuinely concerned about Clark's health, many felt the response was completely inadequate. But here's what made that moment so memorable, and what arguably made the entire story even bigger: Caitlin Clark's reaction. She got up almost immediately, flashed her signature.
Well, now they found another victim, the fans of Indiana. Now, I'm going to side a little bit with these idiots. I'm going to side a little bit with Alyssa Thomas, who said she is the latest WNBA woke gas bag to rip Indiana Fever fan over alleged racism, demanding the franchise and league do something about it. What do you want them to do?
Smile at the crowd, and even threw in a little wink as if to say, "I'm fine, don't worry about me." For someone who had just been leveled on the court, her composure was remarkable. While everyone around her, fans, commentators, analysts, was outraged by what they had just witnessed, Clark simply dusted herself off and kept playing. That single moment of grace and composure endeared her even further to her already devoted fan base. Even prominent voices within the WNBA community, including analyst Dane Cheryl Miller, were vocal about how poorly the situation was managed from an officiating standpoint. Miller stated plainly that Thomas should have been ejected for that play, calling it negligent and dangerous. The consensus among many who watched was clear: that kind of contact has no place in the game. Following the incident, Alyssa Thomas did receive a suspension, a decision that, while welcomed by many...
Who gives a rat's ass? Seriously.
Caitlin Clark is Kunta Clark. She's the actual slave that everybody else is exploiting for their benefit. Angel Reese included at the top of that list. Now Alyssa Thomas jumps in and says, let me get my piece.
Many opened an entirely new chapter in this ongoing saga. Rather than the situation cooling down, the suspension seemed to intensify everything surrounding it. The conversation that had been largely focused on player safety and officiating consistency suddenly shifted. Thomas's supporters came out in force, and the narrative began to fracture along familiar and frustrating fault lines. Some argued the suspension was warranted and long overdue. Others claimed it was excessive. And right in the middle...
If you got people in a room...
Yeah.
If you got a bunch of dudes in a room and says, let's fuck up the WNBA. We couldn't have came up a master plan what these women have done.
Middle of all of it was Caitlin Clark, a player who had said and done virtually nothing to fuel any of this drama, somehow becoming the central figure in a story she never asked to be part of. The WNBA was now sitting on a powder keg, and the fuse had already been lit. If the on-court incident was the spark, the post-game interview was the gasoline.
Talk about this thuggery, a goon attack, hoodlum activity, straight up hoodlum, I've lost my mind activity. Alyssa Thomas flat out targeted Caitlin Clark. The Phoenix Mercury targeted Caitlin Clark throughout this game, which appears to have led to some major injuries. This is nasty work.
After a game in which Thomas's performance fell well below expectations, particularly on the biggest stage of the season, reporters gathered for what should have been a relatively standard debrief. Questions about defensive breakdowns, offensive struggles, and the team's overall execution were all fair game. But when a reporter finally broached the subject of Thomas's individual performance, something shifted almost instantly. Rather than addressing her struggles on the court or taking any ownership of her team's difficulties, Thomas pivoted hard, and what came next genuinely shocked people. She turned the conversation toward Caitlin Clark's fan base, leveling accusations of widespread racism against them. Not subtle insinuations, not measured concerns about isolated incidents on
the WNBA, because it's a woke league and because it's leaned into people directing their hatred of Caitlin Clark at Caitlin Clark fans.
But a sweeping, categorical claim that Clark's supporters were racist, and that their behavior was actively damaging the mental health of black athletes in the league. She went further, stating that in her 11 years in the WNBA, she had never experienced the kind of treatment she was now facing, and she placed the blame squarely at the feet of the Indiana Fever fan base, the same fans who had flocked to the league in record numbers because of their excitement over Caitlin Clark's historic rookie season. The reporter's facial expression during all of this said everything. You could see it, the kind of
and it comes as a byproduct of, Caitlin, I love you to death. But girl, if you don't work on that defense, you ain't winning no championship.
Look that makes you wonder if this had been building for a while, if Thomas had been waiting for the right moment to redirect the conversation entirely away from her performance. And in one swift move, she had done exactly.
They fired her. They kicked her off the game because it's Caitlin Clark and she can't do that game.
Exactly that. Here's where things get genuinely complicated. Nobody in good faith is going to argue that racism doesn't exist in sports fandom. It does. It's real, and it's a serious problem wherever it shows up. But what Thomas did in that interview was something very different from raising a legitimate concern about specific incidents of harassment or hate.
She had to go to the NBA because of players calling all kinds of nasty racial names to Caitlin Clark, white bitch being the most of. I mean, that's the players. Now they sit up there, the one
speech. She offered no evidence, not a single screenshot, not a specific incident, not a referenced post or message. She made a sweeping accusation against an entire fan base, millions of people, and presented it as established fact with nothing to support it. When journalists pushed back, even gently, the conversation didn't become more specific or more grounded. It remained a broad, unsubstantiated claim, and the timing of it all raised serious questions. This was a player who had just been suspended for a dangerous play on one of the league's most visible stars. This was a player who had just turned in one of the weakest performances of her.
Caitlin Clark came in as the most impactful player that the WNBA was seeing as a rookie based off of what we saw in college, from both off and on the court, whether it was attendance, viewership, to her on the court with the scoring and assists. That's how she was when she was drafted. She exits her rookie season as exactly that.
Her team's playoff run. The interview was the one moment where accountability, real, uncomfortable accountability, was on the table. And instead of engaging with it, she pulled the conversation somewhere else entirely. Many observers, fans, and analysts alike noted that this wasn't just a deflection, it was a strategic one. By bringing Clark's name back into the conversation and framing her fan base as a toxic force, Thomas was subtly repositioning herself as a victim while simultaneously casting a shadow over Clark. She never said Clark herself had done anything wrong, but the implication lingered. that Clark's presence and influence were somehow responsible for all of this negativity. It was, to put it simply, a very clever narrative move, but clever doesn't mean right. And for a lot of people watching, it didn't land. Once the clip circulated, and it did so rapidly, the response from across the sports world was immediate and substantial. Former WNBA legends Lisa Leslie and Cheryl Miller both spoke out, calling Thomas's initial on-court actions unsportsmanlike and genuinely dangerous. These weren't fringe voices or random commentators. These were pillars of the league, women who had built the WNBA into what it is, and they were not holding back. ESPN's Rachel Nichols, breaking down the original screenplay frame by frame, was blunt in her assessment. You don't set a screen like that in a basketball game unless you're trying to hurt someone or send a message. That kind of analysis, coming from a credible media voice on one of the sport's biggest platforms, amplified the story even further. Programs like Around the Horn and various other sports debate shows spent days dissecting the incident, the suspension, and the post-game fallout. The question of whether Thomas should have been suspended, or perhaps even faced harsher consequences, dominated sports radio and podcasting for the better part of a week. And then Angel Reese entered the conversation. Reese, never one to shy away from controversy, took to social media and her personal platform to defend Thomas and renew criticism of Clark's fan base. Her involvement added yet another layer to an already complicated story, reigniting debates that had been simmering throughout the season about race, fairness, media coverage, and the unique pressures that black athletes face in predominantly white sports spaces. Reese's participation ensured that the story stayed alive longer than it might have otherwise, and it pushed more people on all sides to dig their heels in. Step back from the individual drama for a moment and look at the bigger picture, and what you see is a league at a genuine crossroads. Caitlin Clark's arrival in the WNBA has been nothing short of transformative. Attendance records have been shattered. Television ratings have surged. The league is receiving a level of mainstream attention it has rarely, if ever, experienced at this scale. That is undeniable, and by any objective measure, it is a good thing for women's basketball. But that growth has also brought tension. More eyes on the league means more scrutiny, more passionate fans, more online discourse, and yes, more toxicity in certain corners of the internet, as is the case with virtually every major sports property in the world. The challenge for the WNBA is figuring out how to manage that growth without letting the noise drown out what matters: the basketball. What the Thomas situation has exposed is that the league doesn't yet have a clean framework for handling these moments. When a star player makes explosive public accusations without evidence, what's the appropriate response? When an on-court incident raises legitimate safety concerns, how does the league communicate its standards clearly and consistently? These are questions the WNBA needs to answer, not just for Caitlin Clark's sake, but for every player in the league. As of right now, the dust has not fully settled. Thomas has not walked back her comments, and there has been no formal league response to the accusations she made. Clark, for her part, has remained above the fray in remarkable fashion, continuing to play at an elite level, continuing to handle herself with composure in interviews, and continuing to let her game do the talking. What's particularly telling is how this has all affected public perception. Thomas entered this situation as a respected veteran with an 11-year career of impressive play behind her. She leaves it, at least in the eyes of a significant portion of the public, as someone who chose deflection over accountability at the worst possible moment. The fans who were already critical of her are now louder. Even some who might have been sympathetic found it difficult to defend accusations this broad and this unsupported. Meanwhile, Clark's stock, on and off the court, has only continued to rise. Her response to adversity, whether it's a hard foul or an uncomfortable media environment, has consistently been to smile, keep moving, and play harder. It's a quality that resonates deeply with fans, and no amount of controversy seems to diminish it. Look at WNBA Updates. We believe in covering this league honestly, and that means acknowledging complexity where it exists. Racism in sports fandom is real. The unique pressures on black athletes are real. Media bias in sports coverage is real. None of that is up for debate, but accountability is also real. And when a veteran player makes sweeping accusations against millions of fans without a shred of evidence in the immediate aftermath of a dangerous play and a poor performance, that deserves to be called out clearly and fairly, regardless of who's involved. The WNBA is at a pivotal moment. The league has an opportunity to grow into something truly special over the next several years. But that growth requires honesty, transparency, and a willingness from everyone involved, players, league officials, media, and fans, to hold themselves to a higher standard. We'll be watching closely. Make sure you're subscribed to WNBA Updates and have notifications turned on so you don't miss our next breakdown. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear where you stand on all of this. See you in the next one.